Hello and welcome to Chasm Technologies Administrator course. In today's training, we will cover scenario outcomes, a single server install overview, a live demo of the configuration and best practice recommendations, and then we will see if we've achieved our outcome results. We will step through setting up multiple users and groups to simulate a Chasm implementation, simulating a few roles and group functions that are typically found in most companies today. Through the configuration and build out of this environment, we will cover various functionality and best practices as we step through containers and workspace access, group settings, web filtering, persistent profiles and file shares, Chrome bookmarks and extensions. And what we'll be doing is showing along the way is us starting from sort of like a wide open configuration to a more targeted and sort of restricted access and what we'll be doing is picking on our accounting user, Brian, and as we go through and lock the account and group access down throughout the presentation. We will finish with a Web UI walkthrough explanation for the sections of the UI that are not covered in depth as part of this course. Single server install overview. The format for each of these slides we will be covering today include links to our online documentation so that you may be able to get more information. So over here on the left are supported operating systems. We support various, any Linux operating system with Bash, OpenSSL, Docker CE, and Docker Compose pre-installed. The reference there in my screenshot here for other it sends you into another part of our documentation. It highlights how you may prep a Red Hat 8 or 9 to check for and install those prerequisites in preparation for a Chasm Workspace install. So for today's session, we will be using Ubuntu 22.04 for our single server build. Over on the right highlights our minimum requirements. A default Chasm Workspace are typically configured to require approximately 3 gigs of memory and 2 CPU cores. Sessions will not be provisioned if these minimum resources are not available. So in this case here, while you could get it to run on these minimum requirements, you should only expect to be able to launch like one non-persistent session. CPU and RAM. So in our sizing and deployment guide, we assume that the Chasm Workspace platform is in a distributed architecture with a separate API, database, and agent components. We will be focused today on a single server build, and so we'll follow the guidance provided in our agent sizing section. For CPU and RAM, the number of concurrent sessions an agent can support depends on the type of workspaces you intend to deploy. So these recommendations assume that each workspace is running on the agent has the identical specifications configured. So over here in the right column, we're making the assumption that in this first row, like every workspace that gets launched, right, it needs 2 CPUs and 4 gigabytes of RAM. So working our way over from left to right, so if the agent size is built out at 16 CPUs and 64 gigabytes of RAM, and we don't provide any override settings, then Chasm will treat this in a 1-to-1 ratio. And so in this configuration, our limiting factor is CPU. So we could get a max concurrent concessions of 8. So 8 times 2 gets 16 to 16 CPUs. For our second row, now we're saying, okay, we'll up the specs. We need 4 CPUs, 4 gigabytes of RAM for every workspace that gets launched on our agent. Our agent is sized the same, so 16 CPUs and 64 gigabytes of RAM. But this time we're going to go ahead and oversubscribe, right, or implement an agent override and tell Chasm that, you have 96 CPUs and 80 gigabytes of RAM available. So by putting in this override, our limiting factor here will end up being the RAM. So if each workspace when launched requires 4 gigabytes of RAM, 4 times 20 gets you to 80. In our third configuration setting here, again, we're keeping the workspace's specs the same, 4 CPUs, 4 gigabytes of RAM. A little bit more hardware on this one, so agent is built out at 32 CPUs and 128 gigabytes of RAM. And then we are oversubscribing it, so putting in an agent override and 192 CPUs and 192 gigabytes of RAM. So in this configuration, our limiting factor ends up being CPU again. So I believe it's 48 times 4 gets you to 192. So similar to what you'd experience on like a VMware or other traditional full stack hypervisors, it is much easier to oversubscribe on cores than it is necessarily on memory. Once memory is occupied, it's difficult to load share that without having to go to swap. For CPU cores, the larger your agent is, the more ability you'll have to oversubscribe it, just because CPU cycles are so bursty. Chasm is set up to use CPU shares, which allocates a session, a minimum amount of compute power behind it. But when the CPU is not used, right, it allows bursting into other slots in order to better utilize the existing processor. So if you have a use case where you are using the platform for traditional web browsing or office work, it can be very easy to oversubscribe the system to very high levels and get very high efficiency out of it. The inverse is to say you are doing heavy graphics rendering or doing machine learning workloads, things that will take up much more of the processing core, as it can, right? It becomes harder to oversubscribe in this case. Each environment, each deployment is different. Workload usage by your users will always vary. If choosing to override your CPU and memory, it is recommended that you make incremental changes to these, right, and monitor them over time to evaluate performance impacts to your users. Disk space considerations, this is a little bit more straightforward. So, the amount of disk space required will also be dependent on the number of concurrent users the agent is expected to host. In this table, we start out with a base size of 80 gigs. So 80 gigs of disk space is recommended as a baseline to start with, all right, to ensure that we can run Docker. From there, you would add the number of users, right? How many users or concurrent sessions that you believe you'll be running. And then the estimated amount of space or maximum size per user that you anticipate them using, which gets you to total volume size. So there at the bottom is our formula, 80 gigabytes plus, user times space per user. So in these examples, right, it's just, 8 times 5 plus 80 gets you to 120, 20 times 10 plus 80, 280, and so forth. Single server install overview. To get it to install, the install commands, right, there's basically 3 commands. Well, the first one is to change it to this temp directory, but then from there, right, to download the latest version of Chasm, right, you're going to download it, extract the package with the tar command, and then run the installation script. So from here, we'll go ahead and bounce between lecture and demo throughout the rest of this presentation. Up first, so for server install, in interest of saving some time as part of this training video, I've already gone ahead and stood up my Ubuntu server and run the install sequence ahead of time. All I did was I went to our documentation for single server install, and I simply just copy and pasted these commands into my terminal session over here on the right. So I change into the temp directory. I ran my curl command, untarred the file, and then ran the install script. And so over here, all the steps that were taken to install, I'll just kind of scroll down here to the bottom. And then at completion of your Chasm server install, you will be presented with a set of credentials, including these first 2 here are the 2 UI logins that we'll need. You'll want to be sure to save these in a password vault or any, whatever your approved method for handling of passwords. Chasm Workspaces installs a self-signed SSL certificate by default. Right, this will generate a warning from the browser when connecting to your instance for the first time, like what's happening here. We won't cover SSL certificates as part of this course, but for guidance on configuring a valid certificate signed by a public certificate authority, right, you can reference our Replacing Self-Signed Certificates page in our documentation. So we'll go ahead and log in with that admin account. Chasm.local. And I'm going to copy this password. and log in. All right, now one of our Chasm's best practices is to change the admin password after you first log in. And so what I'll do here is navigate to Access Management. We'll go to Users. We'll select the admin at Chasm Local, and then we'll go ahead and reset the password. I am using a 1Password password vault. There we go, I like that one. So we'll go ahead and we're going to update the admin course admin account, and I'll go ahead and submit that. All right, password is reset. All right, so now I should be able to just go ahead and, log me right back in. Adding users in Chasm is a pretty straightforward activity. And the input fields are rather intuitive. We will walk through those items in our live demo portion. 2 accounts, again, were created by default, your admin and the user account. So in addition to the best practice of resetting your default admin password after first login, if you have no plans to actually use the default user account that was built, then for better security posture, you should consider deleting it. Groups are used to define roles for specific sets of users in Chasm Workspace. It functions like a typical group construct you encounter across most software. You will leverage groups to help organize and define settings for different sets of users. So let's go ahead now and create some users. So actually, you know what? I'll follow the best practice here, and we'll just go ahead and delete this user account because we will not be using it. And now we will go ahead and add 4 users. So I'm going to create a user for secops_John, and I'm just going to label these with the group that I intend to put them in. And then for password, I am going to just set this to a generic password text file here to the side, and I'm going to use the same password for each one of these accounts that I create. So secops John, go ahead and create. Let's go ahead and add an IT ops Jill. Again, I'm just going to use the same password. Hit save. We will add a DevOps Matt. Go ahead and save the password. And let's add Accounting Brian. Now, as mentioned earlier, Accounting Brian is the account that we essentially are going to step through for every change and best practice we cover. We will log in and out with the Brian account to show those changes. The password is set. So a couple things here to review. Let me go ahead and open up Brian again. So in the user properties, we have starting here right here at locked. So locked account, so it's the default setting. So our default setting for local accounts is 5 attempts, right? And this is located in your global settings under max login attempts. So if they exceed 5 attempts, right, and the account is locked out, right, then this toggle switch will get tripped, right? And then if you have to unlock them, this is how you do that. Disabled, right? So the account is disabled, right? So the user can't log in or authenticate, right, until re-enabled by the administrator. This typically comes in handy for any sort of standard like sunsetting procedures you may have, right? When maybe users are leaving the organization, you don't necessarily delete them on the day that they exit, but maybe there's a grace period before deleting them, and so setting them to disabled, you have that capability. Reset 2-factor authentication. You can reset your 2-factor authentication. Users will be required to reinitialize their 2-factor upon next login. You can force password reset on their next login as well. So these settings apply only to the local accounts. So now we'll go ahead and create some groups. So for all those users, I need to add their corresponding groups. So first up here is we'll do SecOps. And then we have a required field here for priority. So I'll go ahead and click on this question mark. And so here, just giving some a little bit more exclamation We do have a Learn More button here to send you to our documentation for more details. But so basically, we use our priority settings, right? If a user belongs to multiple groups, and there are settings in those groups where they overlap, and the group with the lowest priority will take precedent. For SecOps, I'm going to go ahead and set them to, we'll go ahead and set them to 200, and then I'll go ahead and hit save. So here you'll see that our two default groups are administrators and all users. The administrator group is set to a priority of 1, which gives it the highest priority, and our all users group is set to 1000, so it has the lowest priority. Our best practices around this are, as an example, our all users group. It should be treated as like our settings baseline configuration for all users in your organization. So I'm just going to go ahead here and go into all users, and I'm going to go over to our settings tab, and then here you will see by default there's over 30 plus settings. There's now 37 here as part of this 116 build, that are specified and configured for you right at the time of install. It is our recommendation that for all of the users that you create in your Chasm install, right, that you keep them in this group, right, as part of your group membership structure, right. So any deviation from any of the pre-configured settings that are already implemented here, right, or explicit restrictions you're looking to set up, right, those should be added to the new groups that we're going to create, right, in order to adhere to the outcomes you are seeking. So, a couple things here just to show. We have clipboard. So let me type clipboard. In the all users group, we allow our clipboard down as an example, right? The value is yes, they're allowed to do it. We have clipboard seamless. This is used for Chrome and Chromium type browsers, right? This is on by default, and clipboard up is on by default. We have, let's look for two-factor authentication. So there's like 3 different options here for two-factor authentication. You have self-enrollment, one-time password, and WebAuthn capabilities. These are all turned on by default. Let's look up idle disconnect. Idle disconnect, so this is when you have a workspace that is running, and say like you step away from your computer and now the workspace has become idle. And so this value of 20 is set up in minutes. And what will happen is once that workstation has been sitting for 20 minutes, it will go ahead and disconnect you from that session. So in relation to idle disconnect, we have our keep alive settings. And so keep alive expiration and keep alive expiration action. On the one hand, we talk about if you are, step away from your computer and the workspace session goes idle, we will disconnect it and basically put it in like a pause state. And so from here, then the next value that will impact that workspace is the keep alive expiration. So this is the number of seconds that the Chasm workspace will stay alive, right? Unless a keep alive request is sent from the client, right, to basically spin it back up. And so this value here is set in seconds. So one of these nuances here where for disconnect, we require it in minutes. For expiration, keep alive expiration, we have the value in seconds. So 3600 seconds is 1 hour. So we disconnect at 20 minutes, and then if it continues to sit idle and you haven't come back to your workstation, right, we will go ahead then and take and expire the session, which then will follow this action, so the keep alive expiration action. So by default, we say delete, right? Go ahead and delete this workspace. So other options here that are valid are, so delete, right? Go ahead and destroy the session. You can pause it, right? So the session is paused. Right, this is valid for any container-based sessions only. It will preserve the disk, your processor, and memory state. It will continue to consume resources in physical memory and or swap file usage. And then the third option is stop, right? So just stop the session. So when stopped, it'll preserve the actual disk state, right? So any sessions that are resumed from a stop state, right? So any previous files that you were working on will remain intact, right? But any previous running programs that you had will probably need to be restarted. Let's go ahead now and just go ahead and create the other groups that we need. So we had SecOps. We're going to go ahead and create IT Ops now. And for our IT operators, we want them to have a higher priority, so we'll give them 100. Next, we'll do DevOps. And we will give them a priority of 300. And then the last group we need to add is our accounting group. And for accounting, we will give them 400. And so now we have all of our groups. And you'll notice that, as I was building these out, I was setting priority value in the hundreds. This depending on like how many groups you end up creating, right, this will give you plenty of space to set the priority, where you need it. It is not recommended to set the priority value to be the same for any two groups. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and just make a sample group here. We will call this one HR, and we'll go ahead and set this one to 200. We don't prevent you from having the same priority value, but you may not get the desired result you're looking for in terms of the setting that you're trying to apply. So we do recommend that you do not have duplicate priority numbers when setting up your groups. I'm just going to go ahead and delete the HR group. Okay, now that we have our users and groups, let's go ahead and we will go over to our workspaces and registry. Our workspace registry function is a mechanism which will allow our users to easily install workspaces. And this can be from our own first-party registry, our Chasm registry, or from third-party registries. So third-party repositories allow for external developers to create their own workspaces, right, that will work seamlessly with Chasm workspaces. For our demo, we already have, as part of the new 1.16 build, we've already kind of integrated two popular ones that often get installed, and so Linux Server IO and TwinGate. And so Linux Server IO is the one we want to install now. We have the ability to just click install here and it will do that. But I will go ahead and simulate, let's see here. There we go. And I'm just using Linux Server IO as the example. They happen to provide a workspace registry link here, so I'm going to copy that URL. And so you have the ability to click add here, right, for any third-party registry provider that you want to add. And so it goes without saying, right, you should only install registries from third parties that you trust. But this is how we would go ahead and install that. And so you'll get prompted, right, are you sure you want to add a third-party registry? And then when I click add registry here, because we already had it queued up, it actually shows this now as installed. And so I'll just go ahead and delete it. And then obviously we're providing this automatically now as part of 1.16. Clicking install here will do the same thing. So for our available workspaces, let's go ahead and focus on Chasm Technologies, and let's go ahead and install some containers and get things going. So I'll want to go ahead and add Chrome. We'll add Firefox. Let's get Forensic OSINT installed. Hunchly. Let's do Kali Linux. Look at Maltego. OnlyOffice. Slack. Let's get terminal in there. We get a desktop. We'll do Ubuntu Jammy and Visual Studio Code. And let me take that filter off. I want Wireshark. So we'll go ahead and install Wireshark. All right, so I've gone ahead and installed those containers, and so they are currently loading. So under the registry tab, if you go to installed workspaces, you will see here that we're currently going out and pulling these images down local to the server. So it looks like Chrome and Firefox are up and running. I'll also go over here into my workspaces tab, and then you'll see, like, you know, Chrome and Firefox are up and running, and then the others have this orange triangle. You click on it, right? It says the image has not been detected on any agent. It may still be downloading, right? Refresh this page to check the status again, or contact administrator. In this case, right, we know that because we just installed them, they are currently downloading. So we'll go back to registry, and then we can see they're all still. Something to note, when we were over here, and let's pick another Brave, you'll see that it has a tag of 1.16. So the actual version of the workspace, right, aligns to the version of the server that we have installed. New for 1.16, we actually provide other tags that are available to you to select. And so at the workspace level, right, I can select different tags. And then in the registry, you also have the ability to set the base image here. And so we have 1.16.0, 1.16 rolling weekly, and then 1.16 rolling daily. Now all of our images are hosted out on Docker Hub. And so let me go ahead and do a search here for Docker Hub Chasm. We'll go ahead and go to the Chasm Web's profile. And then here we can see all of the repositories that we have out here. So Chrome just happens to be the second one here. We'll go ahead and open that one up, and then over to the tags field. So here is, you know, we have multiple versions of the Chrome container for Chasms based on the version of the Chasm implementation that you have. We are running the latest and greatest currently here at 1.16. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a filter here. And so here you can see those same three tags that are in our registry drop-down boxes inside of the UI. So you have 1.16.0, which is the current images that we pulled down. And then you also have rolling daily. And so these images are updated daily for Chrome. And so it'll have the latest and greatest patches that are available. And then we also have rolling weekly, right? And so one that is roughly a week old. We had just recently released 1.16 at the time of this recording, and so this is our first weekly image, in fact, and it just happened to be updated 13 hours ago. So in any case, I want to go ahead and reset my core images to 1.16 rolling weekly. And then when we go over to available workspaces, and you will see now that I have Chrome back here available to me. And then you can see here 1.16 rolling weekly is available. And so if we go to the images, actually install workspaces, so everything is downloaded. All of them have the base tag of 1.16 in here. So say if you have your image already up and running, you also have the ability to edit your image, go to the Docker image file here, and then add your rolling weekly this way, right? And then this will update this image to pull down the rolling weekly tag instead. I'm just going to go ahead and hit cancel here. We're going to go back to the registry. I'll pick Chrome, and now I have the option, right? It's defaulting to rolling weekly. And I'm just going to go ahead and install it again. We'll go back to installing workspaces. You'll see that I'm going to get another Chrome instance, which will have the weekly tag image is what I'm pulling down here. And then here you'll see we have 2 Chrome browsers. So a little bit more information around our registry tiles here. So automatic updates are on by default. You'll see here that the checkbox is marked. With our official Chasm registry, right? And it's off for all the third-party registries. So when it is on, our registry will be updated when you hit the registry list page. So whether automatic updates are turned on or off, you also have the option of manually updating the registry by pushing the update button. If a registry has channels such as a CHASM registry, right, new in 1.16, you will be presented with a drop-down menu, right, to be able to select the default image that you want to use, which we did, right, and by switching to rolling weekly. Okay, so it should be downloaded now. And in this case, right, they're both labeled the same. If for some reason you wanted to run both images at the same time, you could do something like edit, and then on the friendly name, right, I can add something like updated weekly, hit save. Then when I go to the workspaces tiles, I have Chrome updated weekly, right, as a differentiator to know they're different, perhaps different versions of the same application. So let's go ahead and we have two Chrome browsers. Maybe we don't want both. So some techniques you can use here to you can delete the workspace, right? So if I wanted to, like, I don't want the old version of Chrome, right? I can click on it right here and I can choose to delete it. Or maybe I don't necessarily want to delete it, but maybe I don't want it enabled, right? And so I can disable this Chrome image. And so when I now go to my Workspaces tab, so my Chrome Updated Weekly is now rotated up one spot. But you can see here that the Chrome tile that we disabled is now sort of like in this like transparent or ghosted out feel. Say you don't want to have this here, right? To maybe this might be confusing our users, right? The image is currently disabled. You don't want that there to them, but again, you don't necessarily want to delete your workspace. And so going into Chrome, if we hit edit, you do have the ability to hide it. And so we will scroll down, and hide image from dashboard is the option. We'll go ahead and hit save. And so now here, right, we know it's disabled. It's also flagged as hidden. When I go back to my Workspaces console, the Chrome original Chrome browser is no longer presented to me. All right, I'll go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and we'll delete this Chrome. And let's just edit this one. And we'll just run with Chrome. We know we just have the updated weekly tag already applied, and we will go with that. Okay, so we talked about in our all users group, by default, the all users group comes configured to allow users to self-enroll in two-factor authentication, but it is not configured to force users to enroll in it. So we'll go ahead and demonstrate that now. So we're going to start with the accounting group here. We'll click edit. We will go to settings. So there are no settings currently implemented on this. So we are going to look at two-factor authentication. And so in the all users group, when we looked at this earlier, we had three options that were turned on. So self-enrollment, one-time password, and WebAuthn. But required two-factor authentication was not something that was set on all users. And so for the accounting group, we're going to require two-factor authentication. So by doing this, right, the next time a user from the accounting group logs in, it will force them to configure it. So, for CHASM, right, we support time-based one-time passwords, right, such as Google Authenticator. Physical tokens and WebAuthn devices such as YubiKeys can also be used. And let's go ahead and add Accounting Brian to our accounting group. To test this, let's go ahead and log in as Brian. So we're going to go here and log out as admin. I'm going to log in as Brian. And so here you can see as I go to log in as Brian for the first time, I am presented with the two-factor setup options. And so what we're going to do is we're going to actually select the one-time password token. Here we list Google Authenticator, but any sort of password vault or storage product that can support one-time passwords will work fine. 1Password, which we are using, supports this as well, so we'll go ahead and set that up. So I'm going to go ahead and click here the SoftTOTP token. All right, so now I'm going to grab this secret key, and then I'm going to go ahead and click Edit. And then over here to the side, I've got a local copy of 1Password. So I'm going to go here. Let me just go ahead and add a one-time password secret key. Hit save. And then it will give me a password to use. I'll hit continue. I'm going to enter the code and then submit, and then it lets me in. So now I am logged in as Accounting Brian. And then I have all of the desktop tiles available to me. We'll go ahead here and let's go ahead and run Ubuntu Jammy. And so as Brian, when I log in, I have an Ubuntu Jammy desktop. The Chasm control panel over here to the left. And so all the default things that are turned on as part of the control panel are available to me. We'll go ahead and delete this session, and we'll log out, and then we'll log back in as admin. Let's go ahead and add more additional settings to our accounting group. Let's go to Access Management, Groups, Accounting, and Edit. We'll go to Settings. Let's go ahead and remove their ability to bring anything out via clipboard or downloads. So let's go ahead and add a setting. And we want clipboard down. So we don't want them to be able to clipboard down anything. So we'll add that and set it to false, right? So it won't allow them to paste text from their Chasm workspace that they're operating in to their local computer. We also want to keep, let's see, downloads. We don't want them to be able to download files out of the Chasm environment as well. So we will add this setting and set it to false. And because we are using Chrome-based browsers, or Chromium and Chrome browsers, we want to go ahead and remove the seamless clipboard functionality as well. So this feature is currently only available on our Chrome and Chromium-based browsers. So let's go ahead now and log in as Brian and see what that control panel looks like. So we'll log out. We'll log in as Brian. And I'm just going to launch Chrome. Okay, I have Chrome running now. When I go to Control Panel and click on Clipboard, you will see that copying data from the session is disabled. But I can still copy data up. So I'll go ahead here and say, this is a test of Clipboard here. And then when I go to my Google and hit right-click and paste, it says this is a test of Clipboard. And so that works. Now let's say we want to test the Clipboard down functionality. And so we will say test Clipboard down. We will highlight all this, hit copy, and we will see that that text is not available to me as part of a Clipboard down. And if I go, let me open another tab here and hit, and you can see here there's nothing to paste. It is not, the seamless function is not working. I'm not able to clipboard out. All right, we'll go ahead and delete this session. And I'll just close that tab out. Let me close out some of these tabs. Let me close this one. Okay, I'm going to log out as Brian. And let's log in as admin. So next up, we generally, we recommend, so you notice when we logged in as Brian, I had access to all of the workspaces that we've pulled down from the registry. I am logged in as the administrator currently. When I click on the Workspaces tab here, I have access to all of the workspace tiles here as well. Why that is under Settings in Global, we have a setting here for add workspaces to default group. So our default group is the users, all users group. And so we generally recommend that in a setup like we are doing here, where we want to control what workspaces you have available to you via the groups, we want to disable this function so that whenever we add new workspaces to our environment, that not everyone gets access to them. So we're going to disable this feature here by toggling that switch and hit save. And then we're going to go back over to groups, all users group, and hit edit. And then from here, we will go over to workspaces. And then here are all those workspaces that were added, and they're available here. And so as part of best practice, because I know I want to control workspaces, what workspaces my users have access to, we'll go ahead and select them all and remove them all. So now when I go over to workspaces, there are no more tiles, and I'm now presented with the default wizard here to about instructing you on, like, no workspaces are installed, adding from a registry, what we did, or adding manually. We'll just go ahead and click don't show that again. And you can see here we have an empty workspace. So since we did that, now let's give some workspaces back to Brian. So we'll go to accounting, we'll go to workspaces, and then we will add some workspaces for him to have access to. So we'll give him a browser, we'll give him Chrome. Let's also give him some office tools. Let's do Slack, we'll give him Slack. And let's also do desktop. Now let's log in again as Brian and see what we have available to us. And there you are. We have Chrome, OnlyOffice, Slack, and Ubuntu Jammy. We'll sign out and go back in as admin. So let's go ahead and configure additional settings we want to implement for our other groups, and we'll start with DevOps next. So we're going to edit DevOps, and we're going to go to settings, and we're going to add. So we talked about by default our idle disconnect was only 20 minutes. And so for our developers, we want to be able to give them a longer disconnect time. And so let's say instead of 20 minutes, they can be allowed to be idle for 3 hours. And so again, these values are set in minutes. So 3 hours is 180 minutes. We'll go ahead and submit that and save it. And because we've set an idle disconnect to be higher than what we had in the all users group, we're going to go ahead and change our keep alive expiration. So we'll go back here, keep alive expiration. And because we have an idle disconnect at 3 hours, we don't want the session to expire until after that. And so I'll just go ahead and double it and say set expiration to 6 hours. Now again, this is one of these nuances. Expiration is inputted by seconds. And so for 6 hours, that value is 216,000 seconds. So we'll add that and submit. Let's go ahead and add some workspaces for our developers to have. Let's give them the Chrome browser. Let's give them Firefox 2. They need to always test their code with multiple browsers. Let's give them a terminal session. Let's give them a desktop that they can work out of. And let's give them Visual Studio Code. We'll go over to users, and we need to add our developer. So it's DevOps Matt, and get Matt added. Okay, next up, let's configure IT Ops. And here we're going to start with permissions. So permissions are settings that will control what your users can do inside the admin portion of the Chasm console. So things like the ability to see other user accounts, ability to create users, create agents or Docker agents, right? Or it's basically our implementation of RBAC. So for our IT group, right, we want to be able to configure it so that they can manage users and groups inside of the platform. So we're going to go ahead here and add groups. We want to be able to create, delete, modify, and view. So create, delete, modify, and view. We'll go ahead and save, and so we have these functionalities for groups. And then we also want to be able to do that for users. So users create, users delete, users modify, and users view. You'll also see that we have users modify our admin accounts. We're not going to add that, and then we're going to hit submit. And we'll show why, by not adding that, what does that limit you from doing. We want to go ahead and give our IT Ops Jill and the IT Ops group some workspaces. So we'll go ahead here. We'll give them to Chrome, Office, Slack, and a desktop. So the standard desktop here, in our use case here, we're just saying Ubuntu Jammy. But let's say we want our IT Ops folks to have a customized desktop that maybe it has more tools, available to them. And so what we will do here is, from our Ubuntu Jammy workspace, we're going to go ahead and clone it. So I'm going to go ahead and clone it, and so it makes a replica of the configuration settings around this workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and change the friendly name, and then we will call it IT Ops Admin Desktop. Right, so to differentiate from just the normal Ubuntu Jammy. Of course, we have other options here available to us as part of this. And so maybe we want to give it more cores, more memory available to it. And then also, all the other various settings that we can do to manipulate this image, right? Get other additional things installed on it for our use case. In this case here, we're just simulating the ability to use clone, call it something else, and we're going to go ahead and save it. We'll go back to groups, IT Ops, workspaces. And when I click on add workspaces, I have the, I misspelled that. But anyways, the IT Ops admin desktop. We'll go ahead and hit submit. And then for users, let's add IT Ops Jill. And let me go ahead and fix the spelling on this. All right, so next group we'll go ahead and update is our SecOps group. I'll hit edit. We'll go to settings, and let's look at max CASMs per user. By default, and in fact, the version of CASM that I installed here is our Community Edition version. And so, unfortunately for us, our max sessions for this Community Edition version is 5 sessions. But let's say we had a licensed version, and we could exceed that. And so, by default, in our global settings, 5, we happen to be limited by license, but 5 is the default out of the box. For our SecOps team, right, they tend to maybe need to run more tools, maybe more workspaces, and so we're going to give them a little bit more. So we're going to increase this value and set it to 7. Let's go ahead and give them some workspaces. So we'll give them Chrome, give them Forensic OSINT, Hunchly, Kali Linux, Maltego, give them terminal. Give them the Ubuntu Jammy desktop. And let's give them Wireshark. Go over to our users. And we need to add SecOps John. Persistent data. By default, Chasm Workspaces spins up containerized sessions that are ephemeral in configuration. So some use cases require the need to have persistent data or configurations as you go from session to session. So two main ways to achieve this are through persistent profiles and volume mappings. For persistent profiles, by configuring this, you will automate the process of mounting a host directory in the workspace. That will serve as the user's home directory. This is equivalent to roaming profiles found in other platforms as an example. When configured, your users will have the option to launch their workspaces using their persistent profile, right? Or they can disable it so that they can spin up ephemeral sessions instead. For volume mappings, generic features to allow you to map host level directories into your workspaces. This will give you the ability to share folders across multiple users and containers. Volume mappings can be configured at either the group level or the individual workspace level. Persistent profiles, so we're able to leverage variables when configuring these paths. We can use image ID or user ID, right, to establish uniformity across our images. Our paths can also be human readable. If we used image ID and user ID, the string of numbers used in there, right, may not be readily identifiable when looking at it on the disk subsystem. And so we do have the flexibility for it to be human readable. And so in this case, right, if you know that the image is Firefox, right, we use Firefox and then maybe username, right, to make it easier to find. So when persistent profiles are enabled and a session is launched, they will be presented with a dialog box such as this, and they will have three options that they can select from. Enabled, right, when enabled, right, our persistent profile path that we defined on the workspace will be loaded during the creation. If it's disabled, then the persistent profile is not loaded on creation. And then we have a reset option, right? So if there's already an existing persistent profile in place, and say you wanted it to be deleted or recreated, then using the reset button will do this, right? It could be useful for the user, right, if they desire to clear their old profile data, right, and start fresh. Volume mappings, so configures your folders to be mapped inside the workspace each time they are provisioned. For our demonstration, we will build it on the local file system where the Chasm server is installed. Our workspaces uses the user ID of 1000 on the host, right, for our users inside the containers. And so we will make sure we need to make sure we change ownership to that ID. And so in our example, we will go ahead and create these directories for the groups that we have, a persistent profiles path, and then changing the ID ownership. And then after those are created, you're going to go ahead and create the volume mapping inside of the Chasm UI. And to do that, it's under the workspaces. The workspace image that you're wanting to edit in the volume mappings JSON section. So here is an example of configuration options. So you have bind, which is the target location inside the workspace's container. Mode defines whether it's read-only or read-write access. Your UID and GID, these here are 1000. Again, we said it needed to be set to 1000. The required field, right? It tells the workspaces to fail a session creation if the share is inaccessible, right? So our workspaces will check that each volume being mapped is accessible for attempting to create the container. If the target location isn't acceptable and the volume mapping is marked as not required or false, right, then the container will still continue to be created. And this last one here, skip check, it is an optional one. When a workspace is provisioned, the system will attempt to establish connectivity to the volume specified and ensure that the ownership of the directory matches the UID and GID specified with the code chown that we used. On some file systems, such as those mounted as read-only, this check will fail and error out. The administrator may choose to set this value to true, right? So the system will skip that check. By default, this setting is set to false. If you don't include it, We just find it best practice to just have it spelled out so that you know without a doubt. So let's go ahead and create those local file shares. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this. And so I'm going to go ahead and copy this out of my text file here I got on the side for those commands. Run this first one. So we're going to create one for SecOps. And then we need one for IT Ops. We need one for DevOps. Accounting. Profiles. So if I go to data, we look at that. Right now they're owned by root. So let's do R and change those to 1000. And now they're owned by OPC. So this environment that I have stood up is built in Oracle Cloud. And so OPC is the user account associated with user ID 1000. So now that we have those created, let's go in and set up some persistent profiles. So we'll go over to Workspaces. And let's set up some persistent profile abilities for Chrome. So we'll click Edit here. We'll scroll down to the persistent, I scrolled right past it, didn't I? Persistent profile path. And for this one here, we are going to use this path. So data profiles was the directory that we created here. And then I'm going to use the variable username here for when this container gets spun up. We'll go ahead and hit save. Let's do the same for Firefox. Persistent profile path, data profiles username. We'll hit save. And let's do it for our desktop and edit this. And then hit save. So now that we've done that, we will want to go ahead and set up our volume mappings. And I did mention that we could do that in the workspaces. So let me actually go back to Chrome. I believe it was right under profile path. So you have volume mappings as an option to set it here. But we want to be able to control that by the groups that our users are in so that they get mapped to the corresponding location that we want them to arrive in. So we're going to go ahead and go to groups. And let's go ahead and set these up for our 4 groups. So we'll start with accounting. We will go to settings, and then we need to add the setting for volume mapping. So we have volume mapping here. And I'm just going to go to my cheat sheet here, grab the JSON code. And so here we're saying, right, we want to map to data shares accounting, and we want to bind it inside the workspace as shares. We have our mode at read write. UID, GID at 1000, required is true, and then the skip check is false. We will go ahead and hit submit. And now that volume mapping is associated with accounting. So let's go ahead and do that for DevOps. Volume mapping. And then we will call this one DevOps. Hit submit. IT Ops. Volume mapping. IT Ops. And then SecOps. For SecOps, we're just going to mount it right at shares so that our security team has access to everyone's volume mappings. And we'll go ahead and hit submit. Okay, now let's go ahead and log in as Brian. Let's go ahead and launch Ubuntu Jammy. So now here you'll see we're presented with the persistent profile option. So our 3 options are enable, disable, reset. we can open this session in the new tab or current tab, and I think I had it on new tab earlier and ended up with more tabs than I wanted, so we'll select current tab here, and we'll go ahead and launch this session. Okay, now that we have Ubuntu Jammy open, let's go ahead and bring up File Manager. We'll go to the File System, and we're going to look for Shares. And so this is the volume mapping that we made and configured. And so inside of here, let's go ahead and we'll create a couple of folders. We'll do accounts receivable. Let's create another folder for purchase orders. You know what, let me if we go to shares and then accounting, and then you can see I've created the folders here, and then the they're subsequently created inside of the local file system as well. Okay, let's go ahead and delete this session. Log back in as admin. File mappings allow the administrator to manage files to be mapped to the inside of the user's workspace session. So a great example for using these is to manage our Chrome policies, actually, which we will cover in just a bit. For this demo, we will show that you could place or upload an arbitrary file to the user's home directory or desktop. You know, these can be applied at the workspace group or user levels. If you have these configured in all three places to the same location, right? Any subsequent file mappings that occur to the same location will be skipped. And then you have the ability to upload, you know, arbitrary files, and we do have a file size limit of up to 5 megabytes when doing this. Lastly, the file mapping definitions, when we set these up, can be marked as writable and executable by toggling these switches here at the bottom. By default, you know, a file is owned by root, and the container user doesn't have any write permissions to the file. So toggling these would give the container user write and executable access if you need them to have it. Because we are dealing with persistent profiles and we have those configured now, it's important to understand the Chasm default profile. So our containers use the default profile located in the home/chasm-default-profile location. So when persistent profiles are enabled, there are 3 logical steps that Chasm will follow whenever it's starting up a container. So the first check is that persistent profiles are not configured at all for a user, right? It's the first time that they're launching it. And so in this case, they're going to copy the contents of the home Chasm default profile path and then place them into home/Chasm user. The second condition is the persistent profiles are configured and they're already enabled. So the first time the user starts a session, no existing persistent profile for this user exists, and then it's going to go ahead and make this copy. And then the third one here is persistent profiles already exist. So no action is taken because it sees that we have a home Chasm user is already mapped into the container. We will demonstrate this as we will set our file mapping to take place on the user's desktop. That third option is now in play for Brian since we've gone ahead and launched a persistent Ubuntu Jammy session already. So let's go ahead and establish putting a PDF file onto the desktop for our users, Ubuntu Jammy session. So we will go to Workspaces and then go to the Ubuntu Jammy, and we're going to edit it. And then here across the top, we're going to click on File Mapping. We'll go ahead and add a file mapping. For type, we're going to do a file upload. For name, we're going to go ahead and call it syllabus.pdf. It is a schedule file. And for destination path, we want to make sure we're putting it into the Chasm default profile, and then right on the desktop, and then the syllabus.pdf file. And then we'll want to go ahead and I have this syllabus.pdf file that we're going to go ahead and drag and drop, and then we will click Save. So now let's go ahead and log back in as Brian and see what we got. Launch Ubuntu Jammy. Persistent profiles enabled. We will launch. And on my desktop, there is no syllabus.pdf. So again, for file mappings when persistent profiles are not configured and you're trying to put something on the home directory for user. In this case, we're trying to put it on the desktop. This may not be the most effective way, right, because of this procedural check. Typically, though, right, whenever you're needing to place files, right, you can do that on shared drives or volumes mapped is often best leveraged instead. And so we're going to go ahead and delete this session. And instead now we're going to go ahead and reset my desktop. And it does have a check here. It says, are you sure? And it wants you to type reset. And then it'll instantiate a new desktop, a new persistent profile desktop, and you will see now I have the syllabus.pdf file available to me. Go ahead and open that up, and then sort of a schedule of events. Let's go ahead and delete this session. So Web App Gateway or browser-based workspace and kiosk mode are leverage our Docker run config override setting. For Web App Gateway, it's helpful in providing external users access to web apps while utilizing the robust authentication, security, and DLP protections of Chasm workspaces. While most commonly this is used to provide access to internal web applications, any web app can be accessed in the same manner as long as the Chasm workspace's deployment has network access to it. For kiosk mode, it removes that browser and browser feel. So it gives you the ability to essentially, right, and remove your navigation ability to navigate anywhere outside of the site or web app that you are providing your users with. So let's go ahead and demonstrate that. And so what I'm going to do here is go to Workspaces. Okay, so let's go ahead now and create a Web App Gateway and a kiosk mode simulation. So we'll start with cloning Chrome. So I'm going to click Chrome and we're going to clone it. And then for friendly name, let's go ahead and call this Chrome App Gateway. For thumbnail, I just we're going to set this up for Wikipedia as the example we had in our documentation provides. And so I'm just going to provide the link to the Wikipedia icon. We will scroll down to the Docker run config override. And again, I'm just going to copy from our documentation the launch URL to wikipedia.org, and then we will go ahead and save that. So now we have one for Web App Gateway for Chrome. So we're going to do it again. We will, you know what? Let's clone this one since it already kind of has everything we need. And then this one, we will call it Kiosk instead of Web App Gateway. And then we will go down to the Docker run config override, and then we will add the parameter for kiosk. So I believe it was -- kiosk, and then hit save. And then now we have Chrome kiosk as available to us. Okay, let's go ahead and add these two new workspaces to the accounting group. Workspaces, add workspaces. We want Web App Gateway. And we want Chrome kiosk. Then we'll log back in as Brian. And then let's go ahead and launch both of these. So we'll go to Chrome, Web App Gateway. I'm going to open this up in a new tab. Here, and then for kiosk, let's open that one up in a new tab as well. Okay, so we have our Web App Gateway and our Chrome kiosk. So for our Chrome Web App Gateway, essentially is giving you that browser and browser feel. From here, I can, click on here, and then I have the back button available to me. Interact with this website as you would a standard website. Again, I have the full browser functionality here. And then I also have the ability to exit this site with full browser functionality. And I could go to, let's go to chasmweb.com. And then we're able to go to a different location. Now for kiosk mode, when passing that parameter, now we don't have navigation buttons available to us. And so without navigation buttons available, you will need to rely on the web pages that are being serviced in kiosk mode having the sort of like navigation needed. So whether that be links to get back to the home page or some sort of back and forth button to allow them that flexibility. And so here again, I don't have the ability to click back or forth from my traditional browser, the buttons that come via like Web Gateway, App Gateway, where I do have those navigation buttons. We'll now go ahead and delete these sessions. Administrators may wish to have certain configuration settings in place when having their users launch Google Chrome. So in addition to building sort of like any features that you want Google Chrome to have via the custom Docker image configuration, you can also leverage the file mapping feature to control this. So you can manage files in the admin UI to configure Chrome settings like bookmarks and Chrome extensions. So let's go ahead and log back in as admin, and let's establish file mappings to configure bookmarks and Chrome extensions. So we're going to go ahead then and go to our workspaces, and we're going to edit Chrome. We're going to go to file mapping, and we'll go ahead and add Chrome bookmarks. So let me add file. And we're going to leave this type as text, and then we're going to call this one Chrome bookmarks. Under description, bookmarks. For destination path, we want this to go to etc opt Chrome policies managed, and then create a bookmarks.json file. And then as far as the JSON content is concerned, I already have that queued up here. The items that we want to add. And just to show you in our Chasm documentation, I'm just following along with the examples given here in our documentation. So you can see here, these were the things that I just added. And I think I added YouTube as an additional bookmark in addition to what was in our documentation. We'll go ahead and hit save. So now we have some bookmarks that we're adding. Let's go ahead and add some Chrome extensions. So same type is text. We're going to call this one Chrome extension settings. Chrome extension settings for destination path. We're going to put it in the same directory. So etc opt Chrome policies managed extensions.json. And then for the actual extensions we're going to add, just copy this in here. Again, I'm going to go back to the documentation here. And for managed extensions, we give an example. So looking at this example, you can't actually like really determine like what thing am I adding. You will see this string of text here. This is the key to identifying what this is. So I'm going to click that. Let's just go to the clipboard and search for that. And then in the Chrome Web Store is the uBlock origin extension. You can see that that string is, this is how you get the extension that you want to add. I've got a second one here I added. So let me copy this one, search for that. And our Chasm Open in Isolation extension is what I'm adding there as well. So I'm going to add those two. We'll go ahead and hit save. And of course, we're going to log back in as Brian and see if those worked. Let's go ahead and launch Chrome. And then here you can see we got the we have our two extensions added, and we have our managed bookmarks. So Google, YouTube, ESPN, and these subfolders with Chrome links. Those file mappings, we did it on the Chrome workspaces object. You could also do it on the Ubuntu Jammy workspace object, and it will set those same extensions and bookmarks for the Chrome instance running inside that desktop. Web filter policy, so the ability to control access to websites by configuring this feature. Once a policy is created, it can be applied via either the group settings or directly in the workspaces themselves. It leverages just standard whitelist and blacklist creation. We also have a URL categorization, which is not available in the Community Edition. It does require a paid license. It's pretty straightforward exercise, and we will go ahead and demonstrate that next. Get logged back in as admin. So we're going to go to Settings, and then go to Web Filter. We're going to add a policy. So this first policy here we're going to add is a block list. Let's go ahead and domain blacklist section. Let's add 3 sites. So let's add Microsoft. Let's add Amazon. Let's add eBay. So Microsoft, Amazon, and eBay we want to block. We don't want to disable logging. Your enable safe search. When this is enabled, and we'll go ahead and just do that, it will enforce safe search parameters on popular search engines such as like Google, Bing, and Yahoo. And then enable categorization. So again, it must be licensed in order to utilize that. But basically, requested domains will be checked against the Chasm URL categorization service. And then you'd be able to set, allow, deny, or inherit categories in this list. Under advanced, since we enabled the safe search patterns, and so here you can see the search patterns to use, so Google, Yahoo, DuckDuckGo, Yandex. We also have SSL bypass, and you can set this by either domains or IP address. Some technologies or websites require SSL bypass, so the ability to just bypass SSL inspections for things like categorization. So we'll go ahead and save this. Oh, I need to turn that off because it's not licensed. Let it save, and let's add another policy. And this one we're going to call one site limit list. This time we're going to turn on deny by default, and we're going to limit you to only go to one location. And well, let's just limit you to chasmweb.com. And then we'll hit save. We'll go to our groups. And for all of our users, we will go ahead and add a setting for web filter policy. And we're going to apply the block list here. So everyone can go everywhere except for those 3 sites. And for Brian in the accounting group, we are going to restrict them to only going to one website. So we'll go to settings. We will add web filter policy. And what site limit is what we will set that to. Okay. Log back in as Brian. We'll open the Chrome browser. And now if I try to go to google.com, I get access is denied. If I try to go to chasmweb.com, I am allowed. And so if we wanted to go to like cnn.com, it is denied. So only ability to go to one spot now for Brian. Let's go ahead and delete the session and log back in as admin. So now that we have all of our users created, we'll pick on Brian here. We'll click edit. Across the top here are various configuration items. So for Brian, if we click on groups, we can see that he's a part of 2 groups. This isn't anything that you can manipulate. These are being read in from the groups object. For settings, these are all settings now that are applied to Brian, and now we can see there's like 70 results that are being returned here for Brian. If we go to permissions, we didn't add anything, and so he was put into the users default users group, default level of permissions for normal users. Workspaces we already covered. Session usage details if you wanted to check, and audit user sessions detailed information. And so workspaces we've been starting and destroying along the way during this presentation. One other thing I forgot to mention about settings. So again, it's based on the group memberships brands are a part of. And then remember, like if there's a conflict, right, that the lower group priority number, the lower the group priority is, right, will determine the setting that takes precedence. And so we were able to demonstrate when we did things like clipboard down and disabled, that took precedence, right, versus the all users group who can download things via clipboard. So in addition to our CHASM workspaces, and we were showing a rolling tag for in the registry settings to be able to set what tag you are using, and then manually manipulating the workspaces directly. Same thing holds true for our Docker services. So we actually have several Docker services run and operate as Docker containers, right, in order to perform coordinated functions in our CHASM environment. We have a good KB article that describes this in more detail in the link provided. But these functions, the CHASM API, Manager, Agent, Share, the Guac, RDP Gateway, RDP HTTPS Gateway, and Proxy, they all, when we installed this in the single server install, it just installed it with the default 116 tag. It may be good practice here as well to add the rolling tag so that these things can be updated when updates are available. And so the example here would be updating the image from, in this example, CHASM Web /API 116 now becomes image CHASM Web /API 116-rolling. The procedure to add the rolling tag, again, this is just coming straight out of the KB article here. You do want to stop services, and then you want to edit the Docker Compose YAML file. And then once you're done editing all those sections, you'll want to delete any existing Docker containers that are running, and then we'll restart CHASM services. So let's go ahead and demo doing that. Okay, so to get our rolling version for CHASM Docker services images updated, over here on the left I have our KB article up here which talks about this process. I'm going to scroll down here to the steps that we need to do in order to run this. So first up, we'll go ahead and stop our CHASM services. Okay, next we want to modify our Docker Compose YAML file. We want to go ahead and add the rolling tag. We have about 8 services we want to go ahead and update. So, all right, so here is the container for CHASM API. And then we'll just need to hit insert. And we want to add rolling to that image. Let's go ahead and look for image again. Manager, yep, we want to update this one as well. Insert dash rolling. Add rolling to share. RDP HTTPS Gateway, and then Proxy is the last one. And then we'll go ahead and save the file. Our next step is to delete existing CHASM service containers. So we'll just copy this command and run it. And then we can go ahead and start the CHASM services back up. And we're back up and running. So let me refresh the dashboard. So that concludes the configuration portion of this section. We will go ahead and step through. We'll do a web UI walkthrough through the other areas of the console. So first up, under infrastructure, Docker agents. The agents tab allows you to see available compute resources and adjust their settings. You can use the edit option to enable and disable agents, which is useful for maintenance windows like updating the operating system, Disabling an agent will not provision any more users to the system, but will allow existing sessions to continue to function. Once all users have had the chance to gracefully or forced to shut down their sessions, you can update the system and bring it back online by enabling it. RAM and CPU overrides options allow you to tell the platform how much RAM or CPU cores the system has rather than using the physical RAM or CPU cores. This is useful for tuning and resource allocation calculations. By default, the platform makes a one-to-one calculation. If an agent has 4 CPUs and an image is set to use 2 cores or 2 CPUs, then the agent will only be able to provision 2 instances of that image, right, no matter how much RAM you have. Each deployment is different, and your workload usage by your users will vary. As mentioned before, if tuning an environment, it is recommended that you make incremental changes over time. For memory override adjustments, those should be considered with much greater care. It's important to ensure that your servers have a swap partition adequate in size to overcome any utilization of RAM. Not having a swap file can result in user desktops being destroyed when RAM is oversubscribed. So best practice here, when you have agents with high physical CPU core counts, it makes more sense to override the CPU core count, especially if the system has high RAM to CPU ratio. The default setting of 1-to-1 is very conservative. We often suggest starting with a 2-to-1 or 4-to-1 oversubscription ratio for your CPU cores. For RAM, we don't really recommend oversubscribing it. Keeping that 1-to-1 is ideal. Infrastructure zones. Zones can be used for large deployments by virtually splitting the infrastructure for different purposes. So for example, zones can be used for security to more easily describe resources and ensure only authorized users have access to specific zones. Zones can also be used to manage geographic regions. You may want to run a stack in US East and in Europe so that you can direct users to the closest region. Go to Sessions Casting. Sessions Casting feature allows you to provide users with a simple URL that will put them directly into a workspace. Casting URLs can optionally be unauthenticated and protected by reCAPTCHA, referrer, and IP rate limits. Administrators may find this feature useful for offering no-auth access to Chasm environments. By default, whenever a user launches a new Chasm session, a container is created on demand. Staging allows you to make workspace sessions established almost immediately by pre-allocating containers for a session. This may be useful to reduce the time it takes for a user to connect to a session, or if the container you are spinning up has a lengthy runtime initialization routine. Branding feature will allow you to customize your Chasm instances with your corporate branding. Again, this is a licensed feature. In order to have access to this, and so since we're running on a community edition, I'm not able to display it here, but this feature will allow you to configure custom branding throughout the platform. So your logo and background for login page, a customized splash screen, workspace launcher background, header logo, and system messages. And again, this feature is only available with our enterprise tier licensing. Storage or storage providers. So storage mappings allow you to create and attach custom and inferior Docker volumes and Chasm workspace containers. This feature can also be used to allow end users to map to popular cloud storage as part of their profile. So providers such as S3, Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox, and so on. Developers API. This allows you to directly interface with the Chasm platform without using the web UI. It provides the ability to create a very customized workspaces environment. More details can be found in our Developers API documentation around its usage. Diagnostics and logging. So Chasm provides basic log aggregation analysis and storage. All systems in the stack send logs to their respective manager. Chasm can then send those logs to a central logging solution, such as a Splunk, or file-based logs can be ingested by a SIEM solution of choice. For smaller deployments, you can simply rely on the built-in logging, which utilizes our Postgres database. In addition, under our global settings for our logging, by default, logging retention policies are as follows. So for our debug log retention, 4 hours is what we have it set for debug logs. For our large deployments, though, is recommending to actually set this to 0 days due to the quantity of logs that are written. For all of the other logs, our log retention is set for 7 days. For larger deployment, it's often recommended to reduce this, and we find that 5 days is a better option. If you need logging retention to go beyond 30 days, if that is required, it is highly recommended to use a proper external logging solution. If log forwarding is configured, right, and then setting both of those values to 0, again, can be used to completely disable storing logs in the database. So in order to determine what license you are running, this is available here in System Info. Again, I am using the Community Edition as part of this administrator's course. So it is unlicensed. We have a 5 limit user license here. What version of the server do we have installed? So 1.16. When you are going to apply your licenses, this is where you go under System Info and add license. And then you would enter your license or activation key here. The import-export config. This section allows you to export and import the entire configuration of the system. This may be helpful for configuration management, backup, restore, and facilitating testing and or automated deployments. The export schema, it allows you to export the system configuration schema or the data structure. It can be used to help construct a custom YAML configuration if needed. Export configuration. This allows you to export the entire configuration of your system, all the settings and things that we had just gone through and configured. And then for the import configuration, this will allow you to import the entire configuration of your system. Using that feature will wipe your configuration and replace it with what you import. Okay, from here, let's go ahead and log in as our various users and see their resulting workspaces. Okay, we're logged in as Jill, and you can see that for Jill, I do have the access to the admin portion of the UI, and I only have access to the users and groups section as we configured it. So inside of groups, you will see that I have access to the groups that we've created, but I do not have access to the default all users group or the administrators group because I didn't add those settings. And then for users, if I try to go in here for the admin account and try to change this to let's say last name and hit save, right, I did not add the permission in order to manipulate the admin account, and so will not be able to alter the admin account. But for the others, like Jill herself, right, I do have the ability to add information here and modify. For workspaces, again, we created that clone, maybe a more modified desktop for IT ops to use. And then we'll just go ahead and launch it. Again, we did that one exercise for Brian where we put the syllabus file on the Ubuntu Jammy desktop. We had cloned this one before we had done those settings, and so this is the first time Jill's logged in and she doesn't have that file mapping is not part of this configuration build. I know we have DevOps Matt. We only have like one setting, which we can't actually test in this environment. So let's just finish up by logging in as SecOps John. And for SecOps John, we have certainly more tools we can use. And I do want to just go ahead and we did make a different mapping for SecOps John. You can see here I got the syllabus.pdf, but for the shares access, we got File Manager, File System, Shares. You can see I have access to everyone's folder, accounting the 2 folders that Brian had made. IT Ops, we're going to go ahead and create a folder here. John's folder. And we'll go ahead and create that inside of IT Ops. go back in as Jill. Just to make sure she has the share mapped correctly. And yeah, so the folder we had just created from SecOps John is here. Let's test web filtering. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Chrome inside of my Ubuntu Jammy. And I should be able to get to google.com. So that works. I should be able to go to chasmweb.com. But I shouldn't be able to go to, I think it was Microsoft. Yep. So our block policies there is working. The other one was Amazon.com and eBay.com. Okay, so that concludes our admin course demonstration. As part of the slide decks, we do have some helpful links that we provide. Things like our FAQ, our release notes, how-to guides, and again, for all of the slides used in this presentation, where applicable, we do have links directly to the source material. Thank you very much.